Okay, so I go back to, I always forget. I need someone to tell me, please, would you activate the recording? Okay. Maybe it's not so important to record, but since Zoom is offering this facility, why not? Okay, so now we continue looking at some drawings by Brusgov. You can tell already he was approaching the fantastic almost, but he built a lot. And believe me, he didn't betray his spirit or his drawings or his intuitions at all in his built work. He did quite well for a self-taught man. But I think when you are self-taught, you are pure, you are innocent, you are undisturbed by restrictions and everything that schools pour on you. And here is an example. So maybe Frank Le Corbusier was right when he said, briser les écoles, même l'école Le Corbusier, break the schools, even the school Le Corbusier, because the school forms you in its system, and all schools are systems. And if your personality doesn't match the system, there are problems. Anyway, fortunately, he was able to function and to build. And he drew well and he built well. Now we see this first house, which was remarkable and which, unfortunately, as I said, was sold piece by piece. Somebody made a lot of money selling fragments of the house, if you can believe it. This was the house. And it's very, very interesting. Water enters the house. You'll see both outside and inside is a very, very interesting, unique house. A section, the plan, many people visited it, but unfortunately it couldn't be saved. Very, very sad. Somebody bought the land and bought the house and decided to get rid of it, if you can believe it. It was a masterpiece of mid-century architecture. Look inside, the stream of water goes inside the living room. And so the relationship between the outside and inside is organic, literally organic. The gasteropode. It's obvious this house was built by someone who was unhindered by fears, by what schools in general instill in students. In the name of what? I actually think if people are allowed to build using their imagination and their common sense, I think some of them would even arrive at some so-called objective informations coming from Ernst Neufert. You rediscover things because of common sense. Of course, you are not going to use aberrant dimensions because so what I'm trying to say is you can build even without many years of study in a school. And this is an example. And there are many others of the most illustrious. I keep coming back to Tadao Ando, how CV is remarkable, says Tadao Ando, truck driver, boxer, carpenter, and Pritzker Prize laureate. There. Anyway, so it's a fine house. It's a house without inhibitions. Well, it was because it was criminally destroyed. But what can we do? There is idiocy everywhere in the world. How could you destroy such a house, and for what? Probably in its place was built a horror. I mean, look at the door. The door itself is an event. Everything is an event because everything is invented by a man who was very inventive. Now, of course, not in every climate this would have been possible, but there it was possible. Can you imagine to have little fish, you know, swimming in the water in the living room? Unfortunately, there are also mosquitoes in this world, but let's hope he didn't have to struggle with them. Unfortunately, the material I have on Bruscoff is not structured well enough, and I apologize because of the pressure of time, but you will see a few other buildings by him. This is also by him. I forgot how it was called, and I didn't double check. But this building also is so different from Frank Lloyd Wright, and yet he is himself considered and you know, promoting an organic architecture. Another building in the woods. Of course, there is plenty of nature in the United States where you can build, you know, with a lot of freedom. But he had a fantastic imagination, maybe even more so than Frank Lloyd Wright. There are books, of course, this is one of them, about his works. You saw this one, you saw this one. I don't even know what this is. It was supposed to be an animation, part of an exhibition. There are many exhibitions still with his work. This is another house he built, and I should have had more pictures, but I only have this one, I think. But you can see there are tourists, cultural tourists, visiting his buildings that are still standing up and not sold piece by piece. I think he's more of a risk taker than Frank Lloyd Wright. No wonder that Wright admired him. This is also a great building which does not exist any longer, but even from this pale photograph, we realize he was a very gifted architect. Yeah, this is what remained of that house. Welcome to Homo sapiens. This was his studio in one of these houses. In fact, that very house that was sold piece by piece. This is some cultural center I forgot I think in Los Angeles or in Oklahoma. I should have double checked. Anyway, so it's like a, you know, official building, so to speak. Another house. He deserves a better organization. I apologize. The next time, if I make it to next year, I will promise I'll organize his work better. You saw these houses. So some of his building clockwise from top right, Bavinger house, which we saw, then a house model, which we saw, then interior design for the home, Albert Frost. I need for sorry. I'm a wreck. Even my eyeglasses are not functioning well. Play Tower in Sooner Park in Hartsville, and then I should not venture in reading this. It's too small for my eyeglasses. Another house that is, sorry for the picture, is not very clear, but you get the idea that he was a great risk taker, and he had extravagant designs. Even this building is quite convincing. It has force, it has vivacity. I think I changed my mind. After him, I will present Sou Fujimoto, because I know I risk of losing people, probably at least some of the people who are here because of Fujimoto. And I don't want to disappoint them or make them wait for 1 hour. So after this, I'll present Sou Fujimoto. This is a church, great I think it's a great church, and we'll see it in more detail at the end. We saw this house. This is another house. Truly, his houses are not inferior to those built by Frank Lloyd Wright. And in a way, they are almost more creative. Sorry, Frank Lloyd Wright, I know you would not like what I said. Another house, so very different from this one, no? Inside the house that was sold piece by piece, this one. Great architecture invites you to explore it, you know, because it's a big yes to life and to creativity and as such. We need good architecture. We need great architecture because it lengthens our lives actually. Now, this church, I have a few pictures with it in Ohio. You already saw a picture with it. It's not bad. It looks like a silos, you know, an industrial building, but if you study more carefully, you see its centrality and its symbolism point towards being a church. And I like this fact that the church design approaches the industrial design, because it's about our time, 20th century, the 20th century or 21st century. This is the model, the 3D laser scan of the church. And I think this is the last image. So we say goodbye to Bruce Goff. We are sorry he died today, but he lived approximately a long life. And now I'll go to Sou Fujimoto, as I promised, because I have richer material about him, and there is much to learn from Fujimoto in our time, about our time. Okay, slideshow from. I have on this presentation also about Ishigami, but I will just talk about Fujimoto. Now, Fujimoto, very, very interesting architect. When he finished his studies in Tokyo, he was probably unemployed because he was wandering through Tokyo and he had this extravagant idea. He said, what if a house has a room here and another room half a kilometer to the northwest, and then let's say the kitchen 3 meters northeast from the second one, and then the bathroom 450 meters south from that one. In other words, he envisioned a house that was dispersed through the city of Tokyo. And you would say, he's mad, he was mad. How could you have such a house? But he actually even built in this spirit, where if you want to go from one room to another, you have to exit the room and then either climb a stair or walk from one room to another room, from one building to another building. So his idea was to disperse monolithical building into various parts connected by exterior space. And this is not the only extravagant thought he had. We are dealing with an architect who has immense success now. And I even know a young Romanian architect who finished at Mincu, and she works in his office in Paris, Andrea Adam. So this is the gentleman. He's, well, he's not so, well, it depends how you look at it. I just read that, for example, this famous Romanian actor, Radu Beligan, said, he quoted Pablo Picasso saying, it takes a long time to become young. And I kind of agree with this, because in a way we are born old, and if we work with ourselves, we have a chance to become younger and younger, especially if we have a long life. But he's, I think, now 45, 48 years old. In this picture, he's younger, of course. And he was trained. You know, there were two centers of education, unofficial education, if you will. One governed by the father figure Rem Koolhaas in Europe, the other one governed by the father figure Toyo Ito in Japan. And Fujimoto was formed, of course, under the wing of Toyo Ito. And I admire these Japanese, that they take risks. Of course, they have also a lot of commercial architecture, a lot of mediocre architecture. Not all Japan is filled with masterpieces, but some of them have the ability to break new ground. And Fujimoto is one of them. And good for them and for him. He talks about primitive future. What an interesting combination. What does that mean, primitive future? How could the future be primitive? But many artists in the 20th century, modern artists found inspiration, and thus they found the chance to look forward, looking at primitive art from Africa or other parts of the world. So there was always some connection between pushing the frontiers of avant-garde art and looking back or backwards to the very beginning of culture. Not so much in architecture for some reason. I think architects still have to learn to find inspiration in what is called primitive architecture. And I have a beautiful book, and I keep recommending it, from that series of 18 volumes edited by Pierluigi Nervi, The World History of Architecture. And the first volume, Primitive Architecture, is magnificent. It shows villages from Africa, beautiful villages where not a single building is rectangular. How do you explain it? Those people didn't have money. Those people didn't have resources or technology. Why did they build their buildings circular, you know, or conical? Or I mean, there is such an incredible richness in the so-called primitive architecture. We can learn a lot from there, because there was genuineness, was ingenuity, there was sincerity, there was seriousness, there was playfulness, there was everything. We can learn a lot from the so-called primitive architecture, just as we can learn a lot from children. But back to Japan and back to between the cave and the nest. So interestingly, Fujimoto wants to situate his work between the cave and the nest. The revival of the cave, or the cave revival, we already talked about, to use an expression, amusing, that was an amusing expression that was thought of by a doctoral student here. And I thank her again for this, because it sounds funny, and it is funny, the cave revival. But we also have the nest revival. In both cases, yes, we are talking about a primitive future. And this very forward-looking Japanese architect just does just that. Situates his work between the cave and the nest. Now, first, he didn't start his activity too long ago, really, about 2010, about 10 years ago, but his success was tremendous. So in 2013, he was already invited to build a Serpentine Gallery in London. And this is the initial sketch. I do not recommend to make such a sketch in school and show it to your professors, because you will be dismissed. But Fujimoto was not dismissed, and he built exactly what we see here, or here. It is about, fragmenting the building, the monolith building, into myriad of particles almost. And it has to do with that dispersion that you will see also in a library that he built, and some other houses that he built. He seems to fight against a monolithic center. He seems to admire the periphery. He seems to admire what is on the fringe. And it happens that I like the same things. So it's some kind of a democratization of architecture, where you disperse You don't have any longer a monolithic center. You don't have any longer, an explicit center towards which all roads converge, like, let's say, a triumphal arch and so on. We live in a different world, and that very different world also made Bernard Tschumi say that he admired more Tokyo and New York and not Paris, because in Paris you still have this centripetal obsession, and in other words, the ghost of the emperor is there, while a city like New York and Tokyo, although they use rectangular Cartesian systems of tracing the streets, there is not a single center. And the absence of a single center is seductive, I think, for those who believe in rhizomic culture, that is a non-hierarchical structuring of both society and aesthetical and so on. So what we see here, yes, he's still a Cartesianist, if I can call him so. He's still a little bit of rationalist, but a rationalist who wants to transform rationality into a cloud. In other words, turns against Descartes in a way, although maybe this is to push a little bit because Descartes was also a religious man. But you understand, Cartesianism or Cartesian aesthetics derive their name from Descartes. White steel and polycarbonate, he built this Cartesian cloud. If I am to express myself oxymoronically, he tried to build a Cartesian cloud, which almost dissolves, almost. But people can still sit on those benches, can climb on those benches, because the benches are also steps. They become stairs, ladders. And this is another idea he had, and we'll arrive at in more detail about this, that he tries to problematize, to question the validity of a distinct or strict or rigid separation between vertical and horizontal. So he creates configurations which dilute the stringency of certain constructive elements. So you don't know where are the walls here, where are the floors? Well, the floor becomes a wall almost through the intermediate space, constructive entities like benches that become stairs and so on. You can see here, and he explored this in other buildings, almost all his buildings, and we'll arrive at a point in the presentation where we'll see that he was encouraged to think in this way in a trip in Vietnam. We'll arrive there. But this being said, we can also acknowledge that this is still, we are within a Cartesian system. That being tempted, yes, to dilute itself, to dissolve itself, but still the cloud had a Cartesian base, if I can say so. It's, I think, one, if I am allowed to express a certain reservation vis-a-vis his work, is exactly this, and also the excessive usage of white. He uses white obsessively, and he's not the only one. All the school of architecture centered around, maybe less a little bit Toyo Ito, but Kazuyo Sejima and Ishigami and Toyo Ito, they work with white quite a lot. Well, in essence, it's a scaffolding, no? But the scaffolding is the structure, as it is so-called finished. But I am asking myself, how come a young Japanese architect, not 40 yet, maybe 35 or so, or 37 or so, he was invited in London to build the Serpentine Gallery. Obviously, this is not just luck, it's because of the merits of the work. And I allow myself to challenge the students here to be equally ambitious and one day to be invited based on the merits of the work to do the same thing, to build a Serpentine Gallery in London. Now we see a proposed wooden mixed-up tower for Bordeaux in France. The works I show are not in a chronological order. I actually show newer works at the beginning and older works at the end. He is on his way of building, you know, the white tower, the white tree. The closeness to nature is a reality in his work, as it is a reality in the work of many Japanese. This is also something worth contemplating, that Japan, although it is highly technologized, does not neglect its relationship and profound reverence for nature. So these are newer works. Now, this is a nomadic structure for a Parisian art fair in front of the Louvre, in fact, in the gardens of Les Tuileries. You can see here again the Cartesian spirit, but he dissolves it. He tries to break it apart. And some cubes, you even wonder, are they floating? I mean, how come they are there in the way they are? How come, you know, they do not fall? Well, they do not fall. It's a pixelated installation. It is a structure that, in a way, connects with the Cartesian spirit of well, I would say the French culture itself. I mean, after all, Descartes was French. There is a deeply seated Cartesianism in France. And but beyond this, we are dealing with an installation by a Japanese architect who built, you know, in front of the Louvre. I mean, looking from here, it's in front of the Louvre. This installation that is a play with cubes. Is Homo ludens playing with cubes of various sizes, and yes, some of them seem to be, you know, flying or floating. What do we see here? I think what we see here is a crisis of reason. Yes, we still base our decisions, our options, even maybe our aspirations to an extent on reason, but then we turn against it. And so it's this, you know, clouding of the initial rational impulse. Or, to use a word I just discovered, rewilding. There was an article published recently on Arch Daily a few days ago about rewilding nature. In other words, hands-off landscaping. Because of the pandemic, there is no money now for people to manicure, you know, nature, to cosmetically, you know, make it, you know, less wild. So as a consequence, nature in parks and gardens will become more and more wild. But apparently there are landscape architects who believe that this is something very positive. And I believe the very same way. I think we should let nature live the way she wants to live, and stop imposing on it our idiosyncratic or less idiosyncratic aestheticisms. But back to Fujimoto and the Louvre and Paris, we have in a way here the physical manifesto of a crisis of reason, or Cartesian mental dispositions. We also see it's almost like a fragment from a painting by Salvador Dali, with those cubes that are hanging there miraculously in the air. This pixelated reality. We still need science, we still need the right angle, we still need the grid, apparently, or at least he does, but then he explodes them and encloses them, and that's what we get. In a way, what we see in this picture, looking at the trees and looking at the installation of Fujimoto, we see the tension between man and nature. What is great is that he experiments, and these Japanese are very good at experimenting. They experiment, they push the limits, and I think they deserve our admiration for this. But just like in the case of the Serpentine Gallery, you see the Cartesian system that is then problematized by increasing fragmentation and also bringing nature in at various levels within the structure. But you can still see the conflict between the organicism of nature and the rationalism of man. Now, for Paris of tomorrow, he envisions something which could be described in a few words like this: the return of the village, the return of the rural. The village is on top of a big office building. And you say, come on, how could this be? Well, it could very well be. In Paris, in the City of Lights, he proposes a big office building, and on top of the big office building, we see a village. So it's the return of the road not taken, is the redemptive gesture of an architect who understands that we need to go back to what we neglected. And what we neglected was nature and there was the village. So he brings back both in Paris. I don't know if this will be built, but considering he has an office in Paris, it's possible that some buildings, at least by him, are being in the process of becoming in France already. What a reversal, no? I mean, who would have thought of this? But maybe it was already anticipated to an extent, even in L'Unité d'Habitation by Le Corbusier, where on top of the Unité, you don't actually have a village per se, and you don't have too many trees, but you have some kind of a new ground 000. In other words, there at the top, it is as if you start something else. Anyway, this is a complex discussion. I will try to avoid it now if I can. Pardon? I've heard the voice. Anyway, again, if anyone wants to say something, please do so. Now, L'Arbre Blanc, the white tree in Montpellier, which I think will be built. If it's not already built, I made this presentation 1 or 2 years ago. You could say, perhaps, if you are maliciously oriented, that it's just a play with the balconies. It isn't to an extent, but there is also an attempt to bring the block of flats to the visual paradigm of a tree. Also, what you can see here is that dissolution that I mentioned before, and I will mention again in relation with several other buildings he built. The moving away from the center. I mean, there is a center, but there is also some kind of longing for the periphery. If I am to express myself in terms of the paradigm of the tree, I would say you have the trunk, which represents the center and the structure, but then you have the branches and the leaves and the flowers in the spring. So he tries to honor both. Well, there is a center, but also he's concerned about, you know, the thinner and thinner and thinner branches, the leaves, and, you know, metaphorically at least, the flowers. Otherwise, yes, it's a block of flats, pure and simple. Well, maybe not so pure and not so simple. Yeah, you see the paradigm of the tree in the left upper corner. So, to put it simply, perhaps Fujimoto is very fond of the leaves of the tree, those that are ephemeral, but we cannot ignore them. Now, this is a building, personally, I don't like very much these newer works by him. New Learning Center in Paris, École Polytechnique, is, you know, typical white, large-scale architecture, institutional, that you know, the successful Japanese architects build and envision. I don't find it, you know, strikingly you know, original, but I imagine if built, it will not be a building to be ashamed of. It's just that it doesn't surprise me very much. It's a large, you know, École Polytechnique, a big institutional building. Again, a lot of whiteness and a lot of light and a lot of steps on which you could also sit. And the amphitheater is as it is. I'm not particularly fond of the ceiling, which is, you know, almost repressive, but I'm sure if built, he would have found something more creative and more organic or interesting. Okay, now this is an interesting project he did for the geometric forest. Again, you know, we are dealing here with oxymoronic meanings. You have a forest and then you have geometry, and this is what you get. You know, you have it's a geometrized, it's a Cartesian forest in a way, and but you can tell that he's struggling to escape rationalism, to escape Descartes, to escape you know, the restrictions of a self-centered geometry, but he still has some efforts to do. He's not the only one who works like this. Even Kengo Kuma did a Starbucks cafe, kind of similar to what we see here. Personally, I am asking myself, do we need to cut more trees down to build Starbucks cafe, or I don't know what kind of houses, I don't know where? You know, I mean, when are we going to stop? You know, I personally think we are at a time when we should be very, very, very careful and affectionate towards everything that belongs to nature, because we need badly nature to fight pollution and to bring us a little more oxygen. So we should leave aside even interesting experiments and allow nature to be as abundant and generous as she can be. But this is what it is. Architects are notorious for having an insatiable desire to build and build and build Although, as somebody said, to build sustainably, the best way to build sustainably is to not build at all. And I totally agree. Maybe for a while we should abstain from building unless it is extremely, extremely, extremely unavoidable to build something. But otherwise, why should we continue to cut down trees when we need them badly? You know, there are enough buildings in the world already, really. I know, in a way, I'm contradicting myself because I'm talking about an architect who was born on the 4th of August. And if I didn't feel questionably in terms of, you know, physical health, maybe I would have tried to contact him and ask him to join us on his birthday, at least for a few minutes. But maybe next year, who knows? Anyway, so the forest that became Euclidean. Now, this is this building, I'm a little bit confused. I always found it as being a Fujimoto building, that I am not so sure. And sometimes the information on the web is not correct. I show it, but I'm not sure it's by him. Anyway. Although looking at the section, maybe it is by him. But Toyo Ito also built the Todd's department store in Tokyo, kind of, but then he was his pupil, so there are similarities here and there between him and Toyo Ito. Now, an exhibition, a prototype for a shared living space for the Tokyo real estate company. He proposed something that is valid, I think. This is what he proposed. And it just happens that I grew up in such a housing complex in Sibiu, in old Sibiu, the medieval part of the town. I'm familiar with this kind of housing where you have bridges and you know, balconies and a mixture between private and public spaces and the courtyard. And it's actually very interesting and very rewarding to live in a housing complex which combines multiplicity with unity. But this was done on the grounds of an exhibition space in Japan. There were other architects, maybe even Shigeru Ban, about whom, if everything goes well, I will talk tomorrow. Tomorrow it will be a day dedicated to two Japanese architects, both very good, Shigeru Ban and Shin Takamatsu, both born on the 5th of August. We don't be like this very often, unfortunately, but I think in this schematic, because this is in a way a model, but in this schematic you know, model, there are suggestions for a different kind of you know, housing complex, which is more flexible, more with a lot of variety, and more informal, less rigid, and I salute such an attempt, because you have both private life and collective life, and it's not just one or the other. This was the, you know, the poster of this exhibition in Tokyo in 2016, House Vision. Now, we go to some paradigmatic houses that he built before he became famous, or, you know, he was towards stardom. The house before House, which is a very playful and joyous and in a way dangerous kind of house, where he works with that idea to disperse the rooms. So actually the house is a sum of rooms which are connected by external staircases and so on, or stairs. And so the, you know, for the bourgeois who doesn't like discomfort, this would be almost unbearable. I mean, what do you mean I have to exit my bedroom in order to go to the bathroom in some other part of the building, and maybe it is raining, maybe it is snowing, or I don't know what. Well, believe me, I live like this in my vacations in a village near Sibiu, where the toilet was in the garden, and it was okay. I just, when it rained, I took an umbrella, and when it didn't rain, I admired the sky with its many stars. So this obsession with comfort, with the shortest road to the toilet and so on, neglecting other parts of the experience of life, is wrong. And this simplistic functionalism reduced life to ashes and to predictable patterns that are the same for everybody, and it's just unbearable, really. I'm very happy that someone like Fujimoto, and he's not the only one, Sejima did the same thing, and others are fighting off this very simplistic understanding about what life is or should be, and comfort. I imagine that bedroom is delicious. I truly believe so. And then, yes, you have to go to the kitchen, which is in some other part. It's okay, it's fine. You have a chance to breathe for a minute the air from outside, to see a tree, to maybe even touch the foliage of the tree. It's fine. You might even have the chance to fall on the stair and break your leg. Sorry, I don't want to sound cynical. Things happen. But it's okay. It's life. It's alive. It's an architectonic organism that tells you live, L-I-V-E. I mean, this kind of house would not be easily buildable in other parts of the world. No, because there are all kinds of regulations and restrictions, and they don't allow you to. But in Japan, it seems, strangely perhaps, because it's a hierarchical society, the laws, the regulations, the rules in construction are not very strict. So architects have a lot of freedom, as you can see here. And this is not the most extravagant one. You will see another one next, which is unbelievable. But even this one is unbelievable. The same thing, he's trying to disperse, to fragment the house into smaller parts, and then insert in the interstitial spaces, nature and the movement of the human body. I love the plan. I love the plan because it is aleatory, because it is playful, and because you have this transitional element, which is the stair, that connects various levels of the house, and everything is just playful, and I like it. You don't need a lot of space. The house itself is a joy to be in, because it's in a way it's a small artwork, or maybe not so small. But look at the site plan. It's fine. It's free. And it seems the inhabitants are happy too. Even with my problematic eyeglasses, I can see that they don't seem to be the unhappiest people in the world. And look at the stair, it's like that ladder there, why not? I mean, of course, the functionalist would say, wait a minute, how am I to bring the piano in? Well, maybe you abstain this time to bringing a piano in, just buy an electronic, Casio or something, small piano. That's it. I think the obsession with comfort kills life and kills creativity, because you also need the body, the movement of the body to be childlike. I imagine these people, when they climb to their bedroom, they are laughing, they are children-like. One asks the other, could you hold the ladder? And then, I don't know, it's something nice, it's playfulness. And then you pull the ladder upstairs, and so no one else could reach you, or something like this. You become child again, and I think that's fine. Plus, there is this confusion, you know, what is inside, what is outside. Wasn't this the dream of modern architecture, to create such a confusion between the outside and the inside? Yes, there was. And it's probably not even a very expensive building. Because you can tell, you know, no marble, no, you know, sumptuous staircase. Good work, so I think it's a good work. Of course, there are losses of energy. Yes, each room has 4 exposed walls, plus the bottom, plus the top. So actually 6 surfaces. Yes, there is some loss of energy, but what can you do? Nothing is perfect in this world. Tokyo apartments. Now, collective housing built in the residential section of the center of Tokyo, what you are going to see now. It consists of four dwelling units, including owner's dwelling unit. So the owner lives there. Each dwelling unit is made with 2 or 3. Unfortunately, the text, I think, was written by Fujimoto. He doesn't speak English very well, and the zine from which I took it didn't bother to correct the text. Anyway, I'll continue. You'll get an idea. So each dwelling is made of 2 or 3 independent rooms of prototypical house shapes. And the 2 rooms exist separated like combination of the room of the first floor and the room of the 3rd floor, and they are connected by outside stairs. You probably know this building because it was published extensively. Now again, who would build something like this and where? You know, where I'm talking from, no way something like this would be accepted. No way a client would accept something like this. No way the city would approve something like this. Nobody would approve. They would think it's madness. What do you mean to build a house, you know, on top of another house? You know, but why not? Because what he does here, and he does brilliantly, he does what actually Andrea Palladio suggested, that the room should be like the house like a street, the street like the city, and vice versa. He's trying to create an architectural configuration through which the one who lives there experiences at the level of his own house the city itself in miniature. And we'll see what he says. Look at the model. You know, yes, it's the paradigmatic little house that any child would draw if asked. And it's a room, and then a house is a combination of 2 or 3 rooms. So like in the previous house, in order to you know, have access to all the 3 rooms of the house, you have to exit one room and climb a stair and go to the other one. So actually, I think you feel rich because you feel as if you own several buildings, when in fact you have just an apartment made of 3 rooms in a cluster of such rooms. You see, Tokyo apartment. I admire Tokyo. I mean, a sophisticated, well, you know, rich city that is open to, you know, for using the standards of another city, extravagant ideas. Bravo to them. And bravo to the structural engineer who didn't say this cannot be done. It was done. And Tokyo is a city visited by earthquakes and so on, and still they built it. Yeah, Fujimoto is a kid who loves architecture, and he plays sometimes like a kid. Look at the section. Rigorously done. Let us not forget they are Japanese, so they know how to do things very, very well. And yes, it was built. And you can find on the zine a richer material about this house. And in fact, I thought of presenting it myself. Maybe I should now, because this house is really paradigmatic for his oeuvre, for his work. Yeah, if you allow me, I will, because I have actually, it's opened, just a second. Okay, here. I imagine you see already the plans of the house. I insist a little bit because there are a few other pictures here, and I think this building expresses his theory, and not just his theory, his way of doing architecture and understanding life. So again, what I see here is multiplicity in unity. I see several rooms identifiable easily, but they're also working together in a cluster. So it's a small housing complex in which, and it's really small. And what is even beautiful, I think, is that the client lives here, maybe at the top, let's say, but who cares? He lives there. In other words, he assumed this experiment at the level of his own life. But what we see here also is the playfulness of a serious architect. And I'm afraid that a lot of times we forget to be playful. In the name of so-called being serious and morose, we actually forget that the essence of creativity is playfulness. Not only that Johann Huizinga said it in his great book, Homo Ludens, but everybody who was and is very creative thinks in the same way. Even Albert Einstein, he says, the best research is playing. Albert Einstein was not a poet and who was not a painter, was not an artist, but a scientist. And even a scientist of his caliber thought that the best research is playing. And I totally agree. But try to tell this in the school where you are studying, that you are encouraged by Einstein or other people like him to be playful. Like these people are, you know. They're curious, they're adventurous, they're pioneers, you know. They don't need big spaces. These rooms are small. This is Tokyo, a very expensive city. But look, inside a very expensive city, they live in a very special building built by a very special architect. Bravo to them. And inside, you'll see some pictures inside, like here. But it's not bad at all. There's nothing wrong with this room. I like it. I would gladly live there. Even if it's a small room, it's fine. It has variety, you know, even if it's just one room, but it has variety. So, you know, Jean Nouvel said that a great apartment is a large apartment. I wouldn't agree with him. I think greatness derives mainly from quality, not from quantity. Of course, it's nothing wrong to have a large apartment, but you can have a small apartment that is quite fine. It's about quality, not about quantity. And, you know, you see here the site plan. I mean, all the houses around are actually bigger but here you don't quite know what's going on. It's an apartment building. It's one single house. There are 3 or 4 units. And I think the miniaturization of life is fine in a city like Tokyo. Now, of course, the functionalists will ask, well, why did you place this square or this rectangle at this angle? Why is it not this way or that way? I'm sorry, sir, but there is also such a thing as personal taste or, you know, even capriciousness. Why not? We are artists now. I mean, in part at least, we are artists. We should be allowed to express ourselves musically. Not everything should be explainable rationally. But the building stands, it is occupied, and I imagine the inhabitants are not unhappy. Maybe I'm wrong, who knows, but I don't think they are. At least they live in a famous house. And you can tell the spaces are very small in the section on the top, you know, where you see the silhouette of a human being, you know, it's okay. They are nests. Didn't Fujimoto say between cave and nest? Well, these are rooms for human birds. Okay, we go back to, because there are a few more buildings I want to show you before we end our presentation on Fujimoto. Now we arrive at another very interesting house, the Jenga House, also in Japan. And this is also remarkable and infuriating for the great followers of Ernst Neufert. Now, please tell me here, in what way is Neufert still relevant? Not at all. Here there are no floors, no walls, and you will say this is impossible to live in. Well, it's not like that at all. Because if life, I mean, if you conceive of life as an adventure, yes, of course, you could hit your head on those pieces of wood. I probably would be the first one to do so, but I don't know, with a little bit of care, you could enjoy, and it's not a big house, it's a cube actually, but there is the playfulness of the interior space, the excavations within the cube that make living an adventure. And look, it's done very, very scrupulously, and you know, we don't have to underline excessively the capacity in this field that the Japanese have. I mean, this is highly studied. It looks very spontaneous, and maybe it is spontaneous, but it is also very rigorous architectural work. And you see the excavations, the subtractions within the cube, that it's almost, yes, the house is sculpted from within. It's carved from within, and respecting certain geometrical patterns based on the wood elements that he uses to build it. It's a very original house, and I think very, very interesting. And the inside is, you know, it might not be for everyone, but for young people who enjoy a sense of discovery and of hiding also, it's here you are almost like a human animal finding refuge within the, you know, the trunk of a tree, or, you know, carving a space for yourself in a, you know, cave-like. Because here, as opposed to the previous building, we do see more the cave than the nest. And it's all done with, of course, a lot of wood was cut down, but look at these people. One is contemplating the sky, laying on his back there. Another one is working with a laptop. And although it's a small cube, you have the feeling that here there are several floors that you could imagine, you know, if you allow yourself a certain level of exuberance, that it has multiple floors. Yes, the floors are not very tall, but because of the variety of spaces, it looks like a rich experience to live there. There are darker spaces, lighter spaces, and, you know, these surfaces, they are multifunctional. They can be used for various functions, to put there some books, to put a laptop, to lay down yourself, to, I don't know, to sleep, to anything can be done. They are multifunctional. And this this is expressed by him in his desire to create buildings between function and no function, as another provocation addressed to the functionalists. Look at them. You know, it's like two neighbors, you know, one is reading a book here, then the girl is looking at him from another floor. And I mean, this kind of experience is impossible in a banal, you know, apartment, in a block of flats. Yes, they are like children. And this is, I think, what architecture should do, to encourage us to be less morose, less stiff, less inhibited and less inhibitant. House and in Oita, now this is another exercise in building in a different way. It's a big, I don't find it very, very graceful, but I think I understand what he wanted to do. He built a house within a house within a house. What we see outside is a big volume, but actually within there is another house and another house. You can see them here in this section. You know, a small cube, then a larger cube, and then the big, you know, prism of what is offered towards the street. So there is some ambiguity here because, for example, where you see the person there with, I don't know what is, a broom or a guitar, probably a broom. Well, that space is inside, but is also outside. So he, you know, he keeps searching, he keeps experimenting. Then he brings the tree from the outside inside, and so he's trying to problematize the frontier between the inside and the outside, just as other architects did and do. Frank Lloyd Wright did it in his own way, Le Corbusier in some other way, Fujimoto in a third way, and of course there are many other ways possible. For my personal taste, this outer shell is a little bit big and you know, a little bit oppressive through its geometry. But I imagine once you are inside, you perceive things differently because you see the three volumes, one within the other, one within the other one. You see the same modern obsession with the inside and the outside. So what he did in the so-called future house, he brought the inside and the outside in conjunction, while in the so-called traditional architecture, the inside and the outside were from the very beginning separated. I don't consider this house one of his best projects, but I showed it anyway. It's actually an earlier work by him. Personally, I miss here certain, you know, so-called details. I mean, the aesthetics of excessive whiteness, I think, are a little bit questionable. But anyway, now another house, also adventurous. I mean, how come these people actually sit there, you know, without the fear of falling? You know, they sit on top of the house as if it's a chair within a room, but it's not at all the case. Of course, we don't see too many aged people here. We see young people, but it's the same kind of attitude towards architecture, to fragment it, to disperse the volumes, to create a certain confusion between the inside and the outside, and to play with various levels, so you don't have any longer clearly defined, you know, floors. Now, I don't know, maybe these are his employees or collaborators. They're all, I don't know, but it looks like an interesting house nevertheless. Because it's also encouraged here a form of collective life, of collectiveness. So it's not just, you know, the morose individualism. so typical of life today in so many parts of the world, but it's some kind of a collectivism. But I imagine in living in such a house, you are continuously on your way to discovery, to discover something, a book, a flower, a floor to sit on, because it's an engaging space. Now, of course, with our air conditioning, I imagine with so much glass, you wouldn't be too happy. So again, I wouldn't call it a very sustainable house. But look at these young people, you know, look where they sit, you know. There are no parapets, you know, there is, I don't know, they don't have, the fear of falling and breaking a leg, or even worse. There are, you know, insurance companies that, I don't know. One thing is for sure, these young adults are actually childlike. They are children. And that's because the architecture encourages them to be children. Now, you see, he talks about the infinite possibilities of open field architecture. And you can find this, film, interview with him on YouTube. He fights against the paradigm of orthodox modern architecture. The Forest of Books, the Primitive Future video. I am just giving you a few references from his work, and you can find a lot on YouTube. The Floating Village that we saw in Paris. This is from a lecture by him, I think, at Harvard. And this is very important, and I will say a few words about this. Do you see on the right a person sleeping there or so with her legs up? Well, he showed this picture in his lecture as an example. He saw this in Vietnam. He entered the shop and he saw a lady, the owner of the shop probably. She was sleeping on some boxes, you know, rectangular, of course, in apparently a very uncomfortable position. But it was actually not so uncomfortable, and this made Fujimoto have confidence in his attempt to irritate the predictability of the relationship between floor and wall. Because you saw he works with prisms that are becoming from floor to wall. You climb on them, you sit on them, you can read on them, you can use them as stairs and so on, as stairs. Apparently, he was inspired by what he saw in Vietnam. Here, look, and I believe it's true. I think the obsession with comfort and with you know, the known, the fear of the unknown. I actually think that capacity of the human being to transcend limitations is higher. We just have to have confidence in our ability to adapt and not listen to dogmas and formulas and all kinds of stupidities that reduce life to ashes. And look, this lady obviously didn't care too much about Ernest Nefer, but she's having fun there, you know, and this may be even a healthy position, because I know this myself now with the problems in my right leg. It's good to have your leg up, because the circulation is better and whatever. Anyway, and yes, without shoes, why not? And this is what Sou Fujimoto did and does. And he's not the only one, of course, who works in this way, but he was able to build in this way. So you can find on YouTube a lot of materials connecting with him. Now we see a very interesting library where he combines two concepts. If I am to use, I generally avoid, because I don't like the word concept. But what he combines here is searchability with strawability. Well, he uses this word strawability, but incorrectly. I mean, partly incorrectly, because I think it derives from to strew, S-T-R-E-W, which means to disperse, to scatter. To put it simply, you know what he wanted to do in this library? He had this idea, and I think it's a correct idea. There are two ways to use a library. You go straight to the librarian and tell the librarian what book you wanted. The librarian gives you a code, and you go straight to the shelf, pick up the book, and then leave. But there is another way to use the library, which is in an aleatory way, where you lose yourself through the library, and you discover books that you didn't know, books you didn't even know existed. So in this losing yourself through the library, you become kind of a dandy, you know, not on the boulevard, but in the library. You lose yourself, you know, in the city as a dandy, maybe, and you lose yourself as a lover of culture within the library. And unfortunately, this second alternative is so foreign to us today, you know, because we are so obsessed with efficiency to go straight to the librarian, get the number, the code of the book, get the book, and get out of the library. But what about the process of discovering the unknown book? And well, yes, here he also provided shelves towards the outside, which I don't know, might be problematic because, as you know, books are not very happy to be touched by sun rays. But who knows, maybe the glass is treated in a certain way. But the idea to bring the book towards the street is perhaps not an unworthy one. They probably spent all the money on the building and they didn't have the money any longer to buy the books, to cover, you know, all the walls with books, but in time they probably will. You see, people are laying there just like in his sketch before, and like in the shop in Vietnam. Well, not as uncomfortably, but still. So this is an important aspect of his work, that he works between function and no function. And I think there is great value in these spaces that do not have a specified function, but which in time become occupied and used with functions that the architect cannot envision, or is not even necessary to envision, because life takes care of those spaces. There is also the return of the labyrinth. You see, to find the unexpected book, encounter unexpected books. Beautiful. Why does everything have to be expected? Why does everything have to be prescribed? And why do we have to know everything? You know, this efficientism, I don't know how to call it, impoverishes life unbearably. He leaves here room for the unexpected. And the unexpected does happen. And you could discover books like this in a library that you didn't know of. But you can also see it's an effort to complicate matters in a way, and to honor life as it is today in its complex reality. you see, between function and no function. Again, I would stress here the no function aspect, because most schools of architecture are still obsessed with functions, function and again function. But life also has so many parts that are surprising, chance encounters, you know, and they're usually those that bring joy to life. And why should we
Okay, so I'll talk about my background. I was born and grown up in Hokkaido. It's a northern island of Japan, and it's a nature field. So in my childhood days, I was just playing around in the forest. And then suddenly when I get into the university.
Hello? I don't believe it. This was actually Fujimoto. but I don't know how, this is the first time I heard his voice. It's part of the lecture that he gave, but strange, I only show here between function and no function. I don't know how he he popped up here. Let's hear him again. That's him. Come on, Mr. Fujimoto, please talk again. You see, talking about chance encounters, we just had the chance encounters with Fujimoto via his words, few words, unfortunately. Really, this is the first time this happened. Very, very interesting. Anyway, moving forward. Now, you probably know this public toilet in Ichihara, a garden escape, another outrageous, you know, so-called outrageous invention, which actually many villages in Romania still have. That he placed the toilet in the garden. Why not? You know, he had this idea when he was in the Arab world somewhere and he needed, you know, a toilet, and there was no toilet, and his companion, an Arab man, told him, well, why don't you go over those dunes? Mm-hmm. So he went over those dunes, and so then he had the idea, why not make a toilet within you know, a garden? So he created this public toilet near a train station. Well, the height of the fence is enough not to be observed from the train. You will see also the train. It's actually, there is also a conventional toilet here, and then this one in a in a garden, and yeah. But you see the same attempt to be more flexible in the relationship between the built and the unbuilt, or the exterior. It's fine. It's fine, you know, even if it's raining, it's fine. In fact, you'd enjoy even more when you arrive in that cubicle which protects you from the rain. And you see the train here passing by. For some reason, I don't know why this toilet is open to only to ladies. And then the other one, you see the sign there on the left of the door. And then the other building you see here is for both sexes and the handicapped people. But it's interesting again that he was able to build something like this. But I see it as an attempt to dilute the stringent frontiers between the inside and the outside, between what we call the interior of the house and the exterior of the house. And I actually think it would benefit us greatly if we become more relaxed in this field and more joyously embracing the relationship between the inside and the outside. I know that in my country here, you know, there are plenty of talks that many schools still have the toilet in the courtyard. It's fine. It's not a crime. You know, it's okay. Why does it have to be? It's actually from a hygienical point of view, it's better to be outside than within the building. Although it might appear so uncomfortable. But it's not uncomfortable for the Japanese, it seems. So his architecture essentially is concerned with in-betweenness, between architecture and landscape, between furniture and architecture, between inside and outside, between nature and architecture. And he's not the only one. Some very good architects today are concerned with this in-betweenness, because it is there in that in-betweenness that the magic happens, the magic of architecture. He is against the predefining system of modern architecture. I take my hat off, Mr. Fujimoto. I am too against the predefining system of modern architecture. In fact, I would go even further. I am against any predefining system. And even the word system is a problem with the word system. And I know it's very loved, this word. Systems, systems, systems. But what are systems? Expression of an excessive rationalism. This is what they are, the systems. Architecture's forest. We have seen some example in his work. The endless library, we saw that library that he built, which could be maybe described, at least in part, as the endless library. Now, this is a very interesting word, but I searched for it. I had difficulties to memorize it. Correctly, it should be strewability, S-T-R-E-W-A-B-I, but even so, that is a word created by him, which means, so searchability is, you know what, in a library, you search for a specific library, you go straight to the target, you pick it up and leave. Complete efficiency. Strewability or strewability, to strew yourself or to strew yourself is to lose yourself through the library, in the case of a library. So to strew means to scatter, to become dispersed over as if scattered. And this is an interesting idea, I think, to bring dispersal or scattered form of being to architecture. But you remember the beginning when we talked about the tree and the foliage of the tree, the leaves, which are also dispersed by the wind, and in time they fall to the ground, they are scattered. So what does this scattering and dispersal mean? They mean the aleatory pulses and pulses of life, fluxes and refluxes, you know, something that is escaping the rigid system, you know, scattered, you know, scattered books through the room, a certain level of disorder, if you want. And I think a balance between order and disorder is better than an obsession with order. So I think to strew or to scatter, to become dispersed over as if scattered, is something I think potentially of great value in architecture, and not just in architecture, but in our lives as well. Okay, that's it. I will not continue with Ishigami. And now I didn't yet collapse. I don't know now. Should we leave for another day talking? I have them here. Pierre Charot and Roberto Burle Marx. They were both born on the same day with Fujimoto, meaning the 4th of August. So it's up to you. Should I continue with the two that I mentioned?
I'm very interested in Burle Marx.
Okay, just for you, I begin with him right now. So unfortunately, I have to excuse myself again because I for various reasons, I didn't do a job as good as I should have. But I tried, and I don't think too many people celebrate these 4 people today, but we do, and we did. We already did with Bruce Goff, we already did with Sou Fujimoto, and now we'll do with this interesting landscape architect, but more than just a landscape architect, Roberto Burle Marx. But let me, I think I turned off the, sorry, the share screen. Just a second, Dan, please.
Dan, can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah, the endless library concept that you showed, didn't Corbusier also have a similar concept? like a building in Ahmedabad is built on that concept. The museum in Ahmedabad is built on a spiral concept which can be expanded endlessly.
For a museum, yes.
Corbusier also had, I think, a similar concept.
Well, he's not the only one, of course. I mean, but I think Fujimoto expanded the idea. Of course, the spiral was used even by Frank Lloyd Wright at the Guggenheim, and Le Corbusier built the Museum of Contemporary Art in Tokyo, based on his research for an endless museum that, starting from a center, keeps spiraling outwardly forever. But I think what is interesting in the case of Fujimoto is his idea to bring the aleatory, the chains happenings, the processuality of life, or I don't know how to call it, to undermine an excessive determinism, that to allow for no function to function. Because when you provide spaces that are not destined precisely to a certain function, in those spaces, unexpected things would happen. Because as Le Corbusier said, life is always right in the end. So if we create such spaces, not for the whole house or for the whole building, but create some spaces where we allow the users of the building to decide for themselves what to do for those spaces, something interesting could happen, because the building evolves beyond the determinism of the architect. Anyway, we should talk one day more about this, because I think it's important. And the fact that he so explicitly works in that interstitial space between function and no function. Okay, going to Roberto Burle Marx, a very interesting man who also collaborated with Oscar Niemeyer, and we'll see one of their works. Unfortunately, in the rush to make this presentation, I'm not very happy with what I did, but I'll show you what I have, what I gathered until now about him. One thing is for sure, he was born in 1909 on the 4th of August. So happy birthday, Mr. Marx. Of course, the word Marx, for those of us born in Southeastern Europe, has a certain resonance. He was called by the New York Review of Books the builder of jungles. What an interesting way to put it, the builder of jungles. But didn't I tell you at the beginning that just a few days ago on Arch Daily, landscape architects promoted the idea of a rewilding of nature, hands-off landscaping. Now, in the case of Mr. Marx, he didn't, he actually used his hands-on artistry, but he used it as an artist. And you'll see some of the things he did. This is the gentleman. He probably also used his, his attraction towards building jungles when he created this shirt for himself, because there is some kind of a graphic jungle on his shirt. Anyway, he has a certain age. He lived a long life, and he was also a great collector, a great lover of art. And we need, again, great lovers of art. We need creators who enjoy life, who have exuberance, who sometimes are crazy. It's okay, it's nothing wrong. We need people like him. Now, the Copacabana Promenade, which is, I don't know, 2.5 kilometers or miles in Rio de Janeiro, he did the pavement landscape, large scale, 4 kilometers. What am I saying? 2.5 kilometers. Mosaic completed in 1970 on the famous Rio de Janeiro beach. I don't have the best pictures, but you can still see, I mean, 4 kilometers is 4 kilometers. And you see the importance of the pavement, you know. Oftentimes we neglect the importance of the pavement, but it wasn't always like this. Like, for example, the old churches in, you know, Renaissance or Baroque Rome, you know, the pavement is of infinite importance. And there is a lot of space there for creativity. Of course, under the sun of Rio de Janeiro, you know, these pictures become even more tempting and appealing. Well, the sensuality of the Brazilian, you know, mental and physical landscape is present also in what he did. As a landscape designer, apparently he designed 2,000 gardens. Can you believe it? 2,000 gardens, but he built only a few. It's okay. I think his relevance is for us high, and that is because I think today we need badly, maybe we need more gardeners than architects, because of the climate change and the pollution and the continuous assault on nature. So I think that some of us perhaps should reconsider, should we continue to build buildings, or should we start to build jungles and hands-off landscaping or rewilding nature? I really think would be very, very refreshing to rewild nature. Well, he wasn't such a wild artist after all, or builder of jungles. You will see he is very knowledgeable and trained. He was an educated artist, and now we see this is the Centro de Arte Contemporanea in Khotim. It has his names. I don't know exactly what he did here, and this is a little bit confusing. It was a little bit confusing for me when I began some research on his work. I don't know if he did a building or he did just what is on the top of the building. But whatever it is, when I look at this picture, I like what I see. I see the presence of man, but I also see the presence of nature, and I see the presence of the artist, and I see the presence of the one who is not mimicking, is not copying from nature, but is asserting his own handling of form, which is an abstract way. It's fine. Now, a park from Sao Paulo, 1954, but I don't think I found this is a work in progress, and I apologize. But still, as a work in progress, we are wishing him happy birthday. Now, this is a park he worked with Oscar Niemeyer, the celebrated Brazilian architect. What a beautiful thing, you know, to have Roberto Burle Marx and Oscar Niemeyer work together. And you can tell that, you know, it is highly creative, you know, it's joyous, it's complex, it's hybrid, it's surreal, it's ludic, it's everything as it's supposed to be. Now, there is a great change. I think working on parks, on gardens, even hands-off, we can do wonders. We need nature. I truly believe we need nature badly, because we extended too much the human supremacy, so to speak, and we are on the verge of destroying ourselves now if we continue like this, building highways, taller and taller buildings. You know, China is building Manhattans overnight, erasing mountains overnight, you know, like Wang Shu said, you know, in the morning there was a mountain here, and the next morning the mountain was gone. I mean, it's unbelievable. Again, it's not very clear to me what was done by Niemeyer and what was done by him. He worked in teams. He did mainly the landscape, but he probably had some intervention also in terms of the buildings. Now, the Flamengo Park, a large public park in Rio de Janeiro built on landfill. We already saw this pattern is not so new. The problem with building jungles or building with nature is that the maintenance must be very, very sensitive and very, very attentive. You know, you work with sensitive vegetal material, you know, and that, you know, I imagine it's not easy at all to keep the integrity of a work. But what I see is I like this conjunction between the presence of man and the presence of God, if you want to say so. Referring to the equation Frank Lloyd Wright referred to when he was asked, "Do you believe in God?" And he said, "I do, but I spell it nature." Now in Venezuela, he did various things. He worked for a number of years in Caracas, and not only there in Venezuela. Well, here, you know, you see how important it is if you have the artist who envisions a certain landscape. All of a sudden, you know, an otherwise maybe banal piece of you know, greenery becomes special because of the intervention of the artist. I will end this presentation with a collage of various images from his work, informally displayed, and in that way, perhaps we can get a better sense of what Mr. Marx was searching for or about. Again, Caracas, Venezuela. I like these plants, you know, they are so, you know, ludically visceral, and, you know, they are beautiful even as graphic works, the plan itself. Maybe this is less obvious in reality than in the graphic work, maybe. Maybe some plants were not planted, or something intermediary between the tall trees and the horizontality of the land. I don't know. But there is a huge realm in the field of landscape architecture in the world. I think we could dedicate our creative efforts in this direction without the fear that we are losing our time now. You know, usually we build a garden, if we can say so. We make the garden after we make the villa or the house. First the building and then the garden. But what if we start the other way around? What if we start with the garden and then we make the building to match the garden? Now, this is a great example of the collaboration between a great architect and a great landscape architect, Oskar Niemeyer and Burle Marx. And I have in another presentation, but I have a few images here too, with a great church that Oskar Niemeyer built and Burle Marx built, made the landscaping. That is the church done by Oskar Niemeyer, a very inspired and inspiring architect. And the landscape is also joyously in very, very friendly terms with the church, as it should be. Here, Oskar Niemeyer used the help of a painter to do the artwork on the facade of the church. It's beautiful when you have creative people collaborate, magic happens. So you have the architect, you have the painter, you have the landscape architect, and they work together to honor God in the best, and I would say even the only possible way, creatively. Because this is what it is. And if you don't do it creatively, you actually, you know, you are not serving the purpose you are supposed to serve, I think. Anyway, in Pennsylvania, he did something interesting in Longwood, the Longwood Gardens, which is very, I mean, very Brazilian in a way, but in Pennsylvania, voluptuously, you know, present this vegetation. It's a complex art. You need to know a lot to know these plants you are working with, and you know, it's a matter that is alive, and you have to be very careful with it. You know, in the winter will not be like it is in the spring or in the summer, and how it evolves, how it grows, how you have to be a very sensitive connoisseur. Once I saw a poster, someone, I think a professor of landscape architecture at Harvard, gave a lecture with the title. So again, she was a famous, and she is a famous, unfortunately, I don't recall her name. So it's almost like a contradiction. If she's so famous, how come you don't know her name? I forgot her name, but I remember the name of her lecture. And she was a well-known kind of avant-garde landscape architect. Her lecture was called "I Hate Nature," and you know, I kind of understand sometimes, because the relationship between love and hatred is complex. Like, for example, I say many times I hate books when in fact I love books, but they are too many and too heavy and difficult to transport, and then yes, I hate them. So when you say I hate nature, it could mean the very opposite. I love nature so much that I actually hate myself for loving nature so much. I don't know, something like this. But nature is beautiful. I mean, flowers are beautiful, stones are beautiful. That water that runs there is beautiful. The stones are beautiful. It's paradise on earth. But with the work of man, of the human being in this case. And you know, by the way, garden, the word garden etymologically meant it's an enclosed space. A garden has to be enclosed. And by being enclosed is actually not wild any longer. It's domesticated, and it becomes implicit that the work of man is unavoidable. I mean, some of you probably heard me saying this unbearable thing. I did say it once, and I'll probably say it again. But I said it polemically, that a blade of grass is more important for me than the Parthenon. And I sent this message to a professor here, because a blade of grass is alive. It grows towards light, while, with all due respect for Iktinos and Kallikrates, the creators of the Parthenon doesn't grow towards light. I am very sorry, but it doesn't. While the most banal blade of grass grows towards light. I am not saying this to diminish the Parthenon. I am saying this in order to underline the miracle which a blade of grass is. That very blade of grass that we step on so often. And stones love plants too. I think the tension between stones and plants is a beautiful one, at least potentially. Now in Miami, but it was completed posthumously. It was a little difficult. I don't think I have pictures. I showed one before, but anyway, it's not one of his greatest works, I think. And in Venezuela again, but I only have this picture, which is unclear and small. I'm sorry, and it was destroyed. It was demolished This one was demolished in Caracas. And then in Malaysia, the Kuala Lumpur city center park. Sometimes, especially if you're in a rush, it's hard to discern exactly what he did. But I imagine he did a master plan for the garden, and then probably indicated certain plants and certain trees that need to be. But to design a park is something very serious and very beautiful, and the chance to assert your creativity at the highest level. Even Jean Nouvel designed a park in Barcelona. Of course, he wanted to be, in competition with Antoni Gaudi, probably. Now, in Brazil, I don't have pictures. Cascata Farm, I don't have pictures. And I end this imperfect presentation with random pictures of his works. The ones I found the most, inciting visually. And this one we saw already. I like this simultaneous presence between the work of man and the work of nature. But even the work of nature is kind of coordinated with the work of man by the same man. But this you could look even as like a graphic work. It's if I had a picture of it, I would put it on the wall, or this one. So he was also a good graphic artist and painter. Yeah, but what is interesting is that here the painting becomes a landscape design, and it becomes part of a larger reality.
Was the green marble stone?
Here, in this plan?
In the previous image?
I don't think so. I don't know, but what made you think that it's marble stone?
Because of the hair texture. I'm just wondering if he's mixing different materials, also expensive stones inside the landscape design. I find it interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we see that he does use the different materials, but I don't know if it's an intriguing question. I don't know. I understand why you thought of marble, but I think the idea to combine various materials is a valid one. And look at this beautiful sketch for, it's joyous. It's joyous as a graphic work, and if it was built, it would have been joyous as a landscaped park or garden. Just as this one would be. Because I like the fact, he works with nature, but also here is an abstract painting. That's what it is. And yes, as Daliana said, if you think of various materials that you could use to create this design, call it landscape design, or I don't know, could be a very, very fine work and interesting and complex. But I'm a terrible cook, and I don't know how to take care of myself. But I could theorize a little bit. I could say, if you want to create a plate with food that is very appetizing, if you work with not just with the positioning of various parts of what you cook there, but also with colors, is extremely important. If you use green and red, for example, because they enhance each other, because they are opposite colors. So you can increase the appetite of the consumer. It could very well be yourself, just by playing artistically with, whatever, cheese, salad, potatoes, some meat or whatever, but also to think in terms of colors, because colors, just like here, they have they animate the work. And I actually verify the truthfulness of what I just said. Anyway, what I guess what I wanted to say is that a beautiful plate is also a very eatable plate. He uses, now I know that I want to eat the lettering of Le Corbusier here, but you see the two numbers and two letters in the lower left corner. Those are Le Corbusier. Le Corbusier invented, as you know, probably his own lettering, his own font. When I arrived in New York City, my first job was for an architecture office, which also used the lettering, the fonts invented by Le Corbusier, but that was the only thing that they used from Le Corbusier. The projects were very banal, but they used the fonts of Le Corbusier. I found it actually very sad. Anyway, and look at this. It's a celebration, right? It's his birthday, and this is a celebration. It's an abstract work. It's vivacious, it's colorful, it's optimistic. And if it was to become a park or a garden, even better, perhaps. So there was an article, and you'll see I will end with this, the link to it, revisiting the constructed Edens of Roberto Burle Marx in the New York Times. This is the article. Interesting that, it was called Revisiting the Constructed Edens. In other words, was an Eden that was made by a man and was not, received from some superpower above us, but was made by a human being, just like us. And this is a big tapestry that he did somewhere, I don't know where, in Caracas or in, so he did all kinds of things. You could say, well, here there are also plans of gardens, maybe potentially, but this is a very big tapestry. I don't know if that's him there kneeling in front of his work or Kenneth Frampton. I don't know, I'm joking. But somebody is there looking in astonishment or so. Anyway, and this is Copacabana, the 4-kilometer long pavement done by Burle Marx. Of course, there, it would have been beautiful even without the pavement, but the pavement increases perhaps, the joy of being alive before the pandemic and hopefully after the pandemic. And this is a self-portrait by him, a very determined man who fought his way through, adversities, I'm convinced. And you need will in order to succeed, because it's a struggle, of course. But he does look like an intense man, and he had a long life to prove that he had something to say. So this is, I think, the last page. When he wasn't making things, sculptures, jewelry, theater costumes, hand-painted tablecloths, he was collecting them. A small selection from his significant holdings in Brazilian folk art, much of it Roman Catholic in theme, is in the show. This is about an exhibition. In a 6-decade career, he designed some 2,000 gardens, assisted in later years by his longtime associate Haruyoshi Ono. Japan, of course. Many of those plans, though arduously pursued, were never realized. Okay, that's it with him. And if you still have some minutes, we can finish the day by presenting to you the Pierre Charot. Okay, I'll do it, since it would be unfair to leave Pierre Charot without the chance to. The problem with Pierre Charot is that although he designed apparently an incredible house, the La Maison de Verre, the glass house in Paris, his authorship is questioned. Apparently, he's not so sure that he designed it. He was a designer, but he never made it to become an architect. He never studied. He was unable to enter the School of Architecture in Paris. So he became an interior, decorator in a way, or designer. But he built at least 2 buildings, and you'll see them. This is the gentleman, and he had a big exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art, designed by Diller and Scofidio and Renfro. And you'll see some pictures from that exhibition. You see, there are books about him. Pierre Charot, designer and architect, was born himself today, August 4th. Some drawings, some very technical, but here he worked with a Dutch architect, so people are not very sure what exactly his contribution was. But the house is remarkable, and you'll see it. And when you visit Paris, you'll have a chance to go there. He loved architecture, but it's not very clear to what extent he actually was able to build. He built some furniture, based on his designs. So Pierre Charon, the question of authorship, Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro designed exhibition at the Jewish Museum in New York, examines the legacy of the French, so it was at the Jewish Museum, not the Museum of Modern Art, the legacy of the French designer. And you'll see some pictures from that exhibition. His mother was Jewish, and he immigrated to the States when it became unbearable in France. So Pierre Charot, Modern Architecture and Design, which opened Friday at the Jewish Museum in New York, is the rare double show, as compelling for the installation by Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro, as for the displays of furniture and interiors by the French cult figure who practiced in Paris from the end of World War I to the Depression. The exhibition is the first devoted solely to Charot, so he died at 67, in 1950, in the United States, where he's known primarily for the design of the legendary Maison de Verre. It's spelled wrong there on the left bank. The show and very readable catalog flesh out the legend, documenting the design career of a successful architect Monquet, who failed the exams to get into the École des Beaux-Arts. And you see a few pictures from the exhibition designed by Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro, with projections that one would expect from Diller and Scofidio. But the pieces of furniture are designed by Pierre Charot. They have a moderate modernism, I would call them so, or at least some of them, and they are close actually to Art Deco. But this is the house La Maison de Verre, but we'll see it more in detail further on. Quite a remarkable building, but he's not very sure to what extent he was the author. He was one of the authors, but it seems the Dutch architect he worked with might have had a significant role as well. Charot, who aspired to be an architect despite his lack of training, practiced primarily as an interior designer, and photographs of the swank interiors he did for Paris haute bourgeoisie show the impeccable taste of an ensemblier, an artiste décorateur who, like a set designer, brought together paintings, carpets, colors, wallpaper, and furniture, not all his own, in fully coordinated interiors. He would have done well doing movie sets in Hollywood, which he didn't do. Well, I don't know about this, but anyway, they don't look too modern to me. But Charot's discreet and limited exercises in metal furniture and armatures hardly prepare us for La Maison de Verre, a full-stop masterpiece of machinery and industrial culture, designed between 1928 and 1932, exactly at the same time when Villa Savoye by Le Corbusier was built for a doctor and his family. In the context of the designer's work, the house emerges as something of a surprise, full-blown and mature. It is clearly an inventive, original monument of modernity. We learn in the show and the accompanying catalog that Charot collaborated on the house and several other buildings with a trained Dutch architect, Bernard Bijvoet, by the way, of unsung heroes. The share between what Charot produced before the glass house and the sudden advent of this radically complete vision gives a visitor a pause. Did Charot really design the house himself? Did his architectural partner, or was it the result of equal integral collaborations, including the one-off work by Dalbet? I don't know who Dalbet was, probably the client, I don't know. It would be helpful to see examples of other buildings designed by Bijvoet to understand what the apparently self-effacing Dutch architect brought to the project. This would be an interesting series about self-effacing architects, because there aren't too many, but there might be some very interesting. Anyway, this is a remarkable building. Whoever designed it is a remarkable building. And indeed, an architectonic machinery, both sensitive and technically astute. The catalog itself asks who actually designed the project, and answers information is relatively scarce. The young Dutch engineer and architect Bernard Bijvoet must have had a significant role, probably. So now you see La Maison de Verre, the glass house, somewhere in Paris. I didn't see it myself, but maybe the next time, if the pandemic goes away, it's a good building. Discreet towards outside and luminous and rather complex inside. And those books there seem to enjoy themselves. And this is a kind of a unique glass wall, you know, made of these glass bricks, blocks. Very interesting. A lot of metal. In a certain way, what was done here was what Jean Nouvel recommended, to bring the office into the home and the home into the office, because this is also the workplace of a doctor. So his office was here too, but it's also his home. And you'll see a picture too, which shows that ambivalence present in this in this house. It's a good building, and as if you compare it with Villa Savoye by Le Corbusier, yes, there maybe in terms of space there is more spectacle or complexity, but in terms of color and materials and even tectonics, I almost feel there is more richness here. Now, it's also called La Casa De Cristal, so the Crystal House, by the way of the Crystal Palace that I showed the other day of Joseph Paxton. This is the Casa de Cristal. So in another place, I found the authors of being shown in this way. First Bernard Bijvoet and then Pierre Charot. But maybe it was just because of the letters. B comes before C, I don't know. But here you see the doctor, right? It's his equipment. He worked from home. Just like Le Corbusier, you know, the sink is for all to see, is in an open space. Now, he did another house for a very interesting painter, an abstract expressionist, Robert Motherwell, in East Hampton, New York. He did it together with a painter. I have a few images of it. It was demolished. Here is the painter as a young man, smoking. A good painter, check him out, Robert Motherwell. Destroyed. And now a few furniture designs by him. This is not bad. It's graphic, it's linear, it's in black and brown. And it has a certain elegance and a certain modernity. Now, he was a skillful designer, no doubt. Pierre Charot. So he was so interested in movement, you know, there are these pieces that extend themselves. Even that chair on the left, you know, could become a chaise-longue by moving a little bit what is movable there. So he was interested in mechanisms to an extent. Maybe he was an ingénieur manqué, not so much an architect manqué. And the table looks fine to me, you know, 21st century, why not? And I think this is the last image. Yes. Well, we did it. I thank you for the patience. And I don't believe my eyes. There are still 15 people here besides me.
It was really nice presentation, Dan. Those recordings, can you put them somewhere that we can take them?
Yeah, I did record it, not quite from the very beginning, but yeah, I will send it to you.